It was an ordinary afternoon in a busy city park. The sun was shining brightly, and people were out enjoying the day, walking their dogs, reading books, and chatting with friends. Among the crowd, a young immigrant named Amir sat on a bench, quietly watching the world around him. His dark hair and warm smile gave off an air of calmness, but there was a deep sense of longing in his eyes. He missed his home and family, but he had come to love the possibilities that this new country offered. Amir had always been an easygoing person, someone who preferred to stay out of conflict. He worked hard at his job, sent money back to his family, and tried his best to make a positive impact on the people around him. Yet, as an immigrant, he faced challenges that many could not understand, especially in a time when divisiveness seemed to be growing. That day, as Amir sat on the bench, an older woman with short blonde hair and a stern look approached. She was walking her dog, a small, yapping terrier, which darted around Amir's feet, causing him to momentarily stand up to avoid tripping. "Watch where you're sitting," the woman snapped, her voice filled with irritation. "Not everyone wants to deal with your kind." Amir, surprised and taken aback, gave her a polite but confused look. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cause any trouble," he said, standing up and stepping aside to give the woman space to pass. But the woman wasn't finished. She stopped, narrowed her eyes, and sneered at him. "You people have no business being here," she muttered, loud enough for him to hear. "Go back to where you came from. Go back to Africa." The words hit Amir like a slap in the face. He stood frozen for a moment, unsure of how to respond. His heart raced as he tried to process the insult, his mind trying to find the words to defend himself. It wasn't the first time he had faced racism, but it always stung. The woman seemed to take pleasure in her words, watching him closely as if waiting for a reaction. Amir took a deep breath, his body trembling with emotion. He could feel the anger building inside him, but he refused to let it consume him. Instead, he smiled politely, an expression that didn't quite match the storm inside him. "I'm sorry you feel that way," Amir said calmly, "but I believe the place we come from is not as important as what we do here." The woman huffed and rolled her eyes, dismissing him. "You're all the same, just taking up space. Get out." But as she turned to walk away, Amir couldn't help but feel a strange calmness. He knew he was different, but he also knew he would not allow such ignorance to define who he was. The woman's words would not have the power to shape his future. What he didn't expect was the incredible turn of events that was about to unfold, something that would leave the woman speechless and everyone around them shocked. As the woman turned to walk away, Amir remained standing, his mind racing. He had felt the sting of her words, but he wasn't about to let them tear him down. Instead, he glanced at his phone in his pocket, checking the time. He had a meeting in a few minutes. He had no time to dwell on this, but the incident had left a bitter taste in his mouth. Just as the woman was a few steps away, Amir noticed something strange, a man approaching from the opposite direction, moving with purpose. He was tall, with a calm demeanor, dressed in a sharp suit. Amir couldn't help but notice how the man's eyes locked onto the woman as he walked by her. The man gave the woman a polite nod as he passed, but the woman, still fuming from her earlier encounter, muttered something under her breath about people like him. To Amir's surprise, the man, without missing a beat, stopped, turned, and looked her directly in the eyes. There was a moment of silence. "Excuse me," the man said, his voice calm yet firm. "Did I hear you correctly?" The woman's eyes widened in surprise, as if she hadn't expected anyone to challenge her. She looked up at the man, her eyes narrowing, ready to defend herself. "I'm sorry, what did you just say about people like me?" the man asked, his voice not raising in anger, but rather in a controlled, chilling manner. The woman seemed taken aback, unsure of how to respond, but then she straightened herself, clearly thinking she could intimidate him the same way she had with Amir. "I don't like your kind around here," she said with a sneer. "I think it's time you all went back to where you belong." Amir stood frozen, watching the scene unfold. He had no idea what was about to happen next. The man's expression softened, as if he had been expecting something like this. He didn't show anger, but a sense of understanding, of something deeper than the woman could have realized. "Let me ask you something," the man continued, his voice still calm but with an undeniable authority. "Do you know who I am?" The woman blinked, clearly taken off guard by the question. "I don't care who you are," she snapped, ready to end the conversation. The man smiled slightly, almost as if he were about to reveal a secret. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone, showing her a picture. The woman's eyes widened when she saw the photo, a family picture. The man, smiling proudly, was standing with a group of people in front of a house. Among them was a woman of similar age to the woman in front of him. It didn't take long for her to recognize the face. She gasped, and her face went pale as realization struck. The man's calm voice cut through the silence. "That woman in the photo? She's my mother. And the man next to her is my father." The woman's mouth hung open, but she couldn't say a word. The man continued, "Let me tell you something. My mother, a black woman from Africa, raised me with love and respect. My father, a white man, taught me to judge others not by the color of their skin but by the content of their character. And I'm proud of them both." The woman's face flushed with embarrassment, and for the first time, she seemed at a loss for words. The man's calmness, his quiet confidence, made the woman feel small in ways she couldn't comprehend. She had no idea who she was dealing with, and now her words seemed to hang in the air like a heavy weight. "You see," the man said, taking a step closer to her, "you just insulted not only me but my family, people who sacrificed everything to give me the opportunities one have today. And let me tell you, I've worked my entire life to build the life I have here, the same country you seem to believe is yours alone." The woman was now visibly uncomfortable, shifting on her feet. She couldn't muster a defense. The man turned to Amir, who had been quietly watching everything unfold. The man gave him a small, reassuring nod. "You're stronger than you think," he said, his voice kind but firm. The woman stood there, unable to speak, her face a mixture of shock, regret, and humiliation. Amir's heart pounded in his chest. He had expected something different, perhaps an argument or more tension, but he never imagined the woman would be so thoroughly silenced. The man smiled once more before turning to walk away. The crowd, which had gathered to watch the exchange, remained silent, processing what had just happened. Amir couldn't help but feel a surge of gratitude toward the man, who had stepped in and done what he couldn't bring himself to do. The woman, still in shock, walked away, her dog now forgotten, trailing behind her. Amir, still processing the moment, looked down at the ground. But in that silence, something inside him changed. He realized that no matter how many times he was insulted or belittled, his worth was not determined by others' prejudices. As he stood there, the man turned back one last time. "Don't let people like that get to you," he said. "Your identity is yours to own. No one can take that from you." And with that, he was gone. The park, once filled with tension, now felt a little lighter. Amir stood in the park, still processing everything that had just unfolded. The man's words echoed in his mind. "Your identity is yours to own. No one can take that from you." It was a simple statement, yet it carried so much weight. Amir had spent so much of his life trying to fit in, trying to prove he belonged in this new country, but he had never thought about it in terms of ownership before. As he sat back down on the bench, his heart was still racing, but something in him had shifted. The world seemed to look different now, more full of possibility. The man who had stepped in for him didn't just shut the woman down. He had shown him the power of embracing who you are, no matter what anyone else thought. And Amir was starting to see that perhaps it was time to stop hiding in the shadows of fear and start standing up for himself. His phone buzzed in his pocket, snapping him out of his thoughts. It was a message from his younger sister, Fatima, back home. "How was your day, Amir? You sound a little off in your last call. Everything okay?" Amir smiled softly at the message. Fatima had always been his biggest cheerleader, even from afar. She was one of the few people who understood the struggles he faced as an immigrant. He quickly typed a reply. "I'm good. Just a strange encounter today. But don't worry, I'm fine. I'll tell you more soon." He hit send and leaned back, letting the gentle breeze calm him. The park had returned to its usual rhythm. People were walking, chatting, laughing, and the world was continuing on, oblivious to the small yet significant encounter that had just taken place. As Amir sat there, lost in thought, a voice broke the quiet. "Hey." He turned to see a young woman standing near him, her hands stuffed into the pockets of her denim jacket. She had dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, and there was something warm about her smile. It took Amir a moment to recognize her. It was the same woman from earlier, the one who had been with the man in the photo. "You're Amir, right?" she asked, a little shy, but with a kind look in her eyes. "Yes, that's me," Amir replied, raising an eyebrow. "Can I help you?" She hesitated for a moment, glancing around the park as if making sure no one else was listening. "I just wanted to apologize for what my mom said earlier. I know it wasn't right, and I'm sorry you had to go through that." Amir blinked in surprise. He hadn't expected this at all, especially not from her. "I appreciate that," he said, standing up. "But honestly, I'm not sure what to say. That was a very rude thing for her to do." The woman nodded, looking genuinely remorseful. She's always been like that. But that doesn't make it right. I don't agree with her, and I just wanted to make sure you knew that. I can't change what happened, but I can at least try to make it right by apologizing." Amir smiled, the weight in his chest feeling just a little lighter. "Thank you. That means a lot." They stood in silence for a few moments before the woman spoke again, her voice more confident now. "You know," she said, "my dad's story is similar to what you said about your family. He came from a small town in the South. When he moved here, he faced a lot of the same things, people telling him to go back where he came from. But he kept pushing forward. And now he's built a good life here." Amir's eyes widened slightly, realizing how much they had in common. Wow. I never expected that." The woman shrugged, a smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "It's easy to forget that we all have our own battles. And sometimes the people who hurt us the most are just as broken as we are." Amir felt a strange connection with her, as if this conversation was somehow meant to happen. "I never thought about it that way," he said quietly. "Well," she said with a wink, "sometimes you just need someone to remind you. Besides, we've all got stories. But it's how we handle them that counts, right?" Amir couldn't help but nod. She was right. The words people said, the prejudice they carried, it wasn't something he could control. But how he reacted to it, how he let it shape him, that was entirely in his hands. "Thanks," he said, his voice full of sincerity. "You're right. It's not about letting others define us." She smiled, and before she left, she added, "If you ever need someone to talk to, I'm here." Amir watched her walk away, his heart feeling lighter than it had all day. He had faced a difficult moment earlier, but now, something in him had changed. The world was no longer a place where he felt like an outsider, but a place where he could find strength, even in the most unexpected of places. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the park, Amir took a deep breath and walked to his meeting, knowing that no matter what, He was ready to face whatever came next. And in that moment, he knew he would never let anyone define his worth again. He owned his identity, and nothing could take that away.
The end.